Hi, welcome. My name is Charlotte. I love colorful and sparkly makeup, and today I want to talk about my favorite colors of eyeshadow or eyeshadow colors that intrigue me. The colors that most excite me right now in makeup. And we might be doing a little bit of swatching, but I'm definitely going to be inserting some photos of the kinds of colors that I'm talking about. So I've scooted myself over and I may be inserting them there. Anyway, if I'm uncentered and there's nothing beside me at any given moment, like, don't judge me. So I want to start by just calling out this eye look I'm wearing, which I love, and which incorporates some of the colors that I'm going to talk about. I'm wearing, obviously, mainly green. The star of the show is this shade from Oden's eye, which is called Gabriel, and it's like a yellow leaning green, bright springy green with a blue sparkle suspended in it. I topped it with this blue glitter. It's like an iridescent blue glitter from LA Girl called Holo-Glam, and I just love the effect. Like, I have to say the Oden's eye shade it's already pretty twinkly and sparkly with that blue suspended over the green base, but this just really amped it up and reminded me that I need to get much more use out of this little guy. So to me, colors evoke feelings, and I think that's part of why they feel so rich and interesting to me. Color was my entry into makeup. At the time I was interested, I got into makeup 2018, 2019, and at that time I was really interested in like bright, pure colors. I was not so fussed about textures. That's something that I'm more starting to think about now. But you know, I was coming up on ColourPop, and especially at that time, it was what I would consider the golden age of ColourPop, which was all about the 9-pan monochromatic palettes. I used to be subscribed to their emails, and I would quite eagerly await the news of what monochromatic 9-pan they were releasing next. I really loved something about the uniformity of those palettes and the fact that they each came in a different color. Also the purity of the colors. They focused, at that time more on bright, what I would call crayon box colors. So, the bright green, the bright blue, the bright red. And then I think it was later on that they started incorporating, the wine colors, the lilac colors, the more nuanced shades. But at that time, I was really just interested in the colors that you would find in an 8-crayon Crayola box. I love that shit. I mean, I still love that shit. I think the story of this video is me sort of departing a little bit from those pure colors and exploring more nuance. So I'm going to talk about that, much more in the next few minutes. But I look back on those 9-pan palettes so fondly, and I still have the ones that I bought. The only one I've decluttered a good amount of is It's My Pleasure, because I really don't care for pink leaning purples. That's just something that doesn't look good on me and I didn't really have an interest in. I bought that palette hoping it would be more pure purple, but yeah, it just wasn't what I expected. So I've decluttered a good amount of that palette, but I still have Strawberry Shake, Blue Moon, Mint to Be, Main Squeeze, and Making Mauves as well, which is more of the nuanced color stories that they released later, but these are some of my favorite palettes. And I think the mattes in general really hold up. The shimmers, like I said, I think once you take an interest in texture, the shimmers definitely don't hold up as well. But yeah, they were definitely my favorite palettes for a long time. And I found it so satisfying too to have them. I think this was maybe where I had a little bit of a collector's mindset to makeup. Even though I didn't purchase all the ColourPop monochromatic 9-pans, but I don't know, yeah, there was just something so satisfying about them as a collection. And relatedly, I think that those 9-pan palettes really informed my approach to collecting makeup and to expanding my collection. So I would sort of like advance as a makeup user by stepping into a new color zone, color family. So, you know, for example, I remember vividly when I got like into blue eyeshadow, and I did that by trying the Blue Moon palette. And so for $12, you know, I would suddenly have this really rich variety of blues in my collection, and I could from there like experiment and become aware of blue eyeshadow. And I could do this progressively with different colors as my taste expanded and as my collection expanded. And I really had this goal to be able to create any colored makeup look that I would ever want to create. Again, based only on color, not on like varieties of texture or anything like that. But yeah, that very much explains the eyeshadow that I still have today. And I would say that I still look at palettes more attracted to colors than I am to color stories. And I think like there's a good aspect to this, you know, it's allowed me to avoid having a ton of dupes in my collection. Because when I look at a palette, I'm like, oh, that's a unique shade, or that's a color family that I would love to add to my collection. And as a result, I have over the years continued to gravitate toward monochromatic color stories. And it's why today I'm more interested in single shadows, because I'm not really interested in like duping out a bunch of shades that aren't that interesting. I'm looking usually for like a specific shade, a specific kind of shade, or a specific color in a specific texture, if this makes sense. Okay, I added an overhead light. So I'm gonna go through like 3 color families that are really attracting me right now, and areas where I want to explore more, you know, creating looks with the makeup I already have, and also where I'm looking to like expand new nuances of color in my collection. And I'm gonna start with my favorite color, which is green. That's probably already not a secret to you on this channel, but I love almost all shades of green. This is my favorite color for eyeshadow, but also my favorite color in the real world. I've always loved green in the world. For example, I live in a city right now. I want to continue living in cities, but in cities I'm always attracted to those quiet, leafy, canopied streets. I love that. I love being surrounded by trees and plants and greenery. I also grew up on the coast of Maine, so I have an affinity for that sort of murky green of the ocean there. We learned in school that the water there is very nutritious, and it's full of like plankton and algae and microorganisms, and so that's what gives it that murky quality. And as a result, it has this like gray-green color that I'm super attracted to, and that sort of like I feel an affinity for, I think. There's something about both leafy greens and oceany greens that they speak to my soul, like they make me feel at home. When I was a little kid, I had this like super ratty, bright lime green LL Bean fleece that I wore every single day, and I refused to be told that it was ugly or ratty or dirty. So that fleece eventually had to be retired. But a few years later, when I was in middle school, so probably like 13 or so, I remember going back to school shopping with my mom and my grandmother, and I ended up getting a few different clothes in like earth tones, so like dark khaki greens and khaki browns. And I remember I just felt like $1,000,000 in those clothes. I felt so beautiful, and my mom told me that earth tones really suited me. And at that time, I wasn't used to feeling beautiful. I mean, I was 13, but also like I was not considered a beautiful child. I was not considered stylish. My overall aspect was just a little bit ratty. And I had these like big glasses. And at the time, like I was starting to flirt with expressing myself through brightly colored clothes, but it didn't really occur to me that they would or could be flattering to me or make me feel beautiful. So discovering that like earth tones suited me, and feeling really great in those clothes, it was a totally new experience. For me, green is a color that both feels exciting and inspiring to me and also flatters my skin tone. And I feel like this is rare. So I love green in general. It's my favorite color because I love it. But I think that's probably also informed by the fact that I feel really good in green. But despite the fact that it was my favorite color and it suited me, I didn't really start wearing green eyeshadow until this past year, because I hadn't found sort of my perfect green. I was always looking for like this really true green, crayon box green. I would call it a parrot green. They didn't have this green in the ColourPop green 9 pan at the time, just my luck. And it also didn't exist in the Fade into Hue palette, the rainbow palette that I ended up getting to sort of like fill in gaps in my like rainbow eyeshadows. But I have since found that color in eyeshadow form. It's called Icono, and it's from Terra Moons. And this is not like a super sparkly shade, so this is very much in keeping with that, prioritizing color over texture. So this is Terra Moon's Icono compared with Lime from the Beauty Bay Earthy palette. And I think you can probably see that Lime just has a lot more yellow in it. And in my experience, this is a much easier kind of shade to find. Whereas Icono, which is a more pure green, for whatever reason, I just had a really hard time finding something with these exact undertones. Icono is really the like crayon box green of my dreams. So I'm really happy to have that green in my life, but one of the most important steps in my journey as a green lover was getting the Beauty Bay Earthy palette. I've since depotted this palette, but this is my green eyeshadow, and you can see that most of it comes from that palette. It's obviously full of those really rich earthy greens that I feel look good on me and make me feel good, but it's also like it's opened my mind to so many more nuances of green. So as a result, I've become interested in olive greens, sage greens, wintry icy greens, murky swampy greens. What else? Oh, bronzy antique kind of greens, and also some light teals, which I'll talk about in a moment. Here are a couple olive greens in my collection. This one is from Oden's Eye. It's called Gabriel, and it's one of my favorite shadows at the moment. I think it translates a little bit more sparkly on the eye. And then this one is the shade Anaconda from the Flower Beauty Jungle. Okay, these are some greens that I would describe as a little bit antique. This first one is from the Earthy palette and it's called Sage. It's definitely not the like gray, cool toned sage green that I'm looking for and what I would really mean when I say sage green, but it's still a really pretty color. This is also from Earthy. It's called Folklore, and I adore this shade. I just think there's something so interesting about it. It's kind of bronzy, but it still feels like a green to me. And then this comes from a Rude Cosmetics palette called, I want to say, Enchanted Pixies. It's an unlabeled shade, and it's definitely a bottom shelf formula, so a little bit more satin. But I think for this kind of shade, that actually kind of works, because this shade really gives me the feeling of like old metal, like antique aged bronze that has been buried and dug up. It sort of evokes to me that greenish patina that forms on old metal. And it does have like a little something green going on, like a little green shimmer. Okay, this bottom shade here is called Time Shift from Terra Moons, and it's obviously a really impressive shift. It's one of the shiftier shades in my collection. What you're seeing is more of a gold, but from my angle, there's a bright green shift that's really predominating. You can also see that the base is a sort of grayish purple, but it really translates as like, an iridescent, a sheer based iridescent. And it's very smooth. There's no sparkle in this, really. So even though this is the more impressive shift, I actually prefer this shade, which is Ray from the Earthy palette. I just adore this shade so much. It's got more sparkle than Time Shift, and it's just a little twinklier on the eye. It's like a golden green sparkle particle. And I love dusting this, in a sheer layer across my lid or putting this on the inner corner. I just think this shade is so, so magical. These are some kind of murky, earthy greens. They just happen to be the mattes in the earthy palette that I use the most. That's why I chose them to swatch. Here at the top is Fern, then Whistle, then Corduroy. This is an interesting shade to me. It comes from that same Rude Cosmetics palette, and I would call this a forest green or even like a mermaidy green. It's very cool in the base, even though it has a bit of a golden shimmer on top. Again, a very satin formula, but this was sort of the first cool toned green that I really loved. And for whatever reason before that, cool toned greens had just not interested me at all. But I was really into this shade this past winter. I think it just creates a really evocative winter look. It sort of made me think of like a pine forest. Yeah, so I'm just so excited to explore more looks with these greens. For me, I think there's a green for every season, and I really think that I could wear green eyeshadow of some form every day and really not have a reason to get bored for a very long time. I have my bases covered for sure on like a lot of the greens I'm interested in exploring more. But I will say like there are some really nuanced grayish greens from Dandelion Cosmetics that I'm interested in trying. I've also been on the hunt for like a cool gray sage green, which has felt hard to find. Like you find warm sage greens or you find mint greens, but what I'm looking for is something more gray than those. What else? Oh, I'm interested in the Sorcery palette from Lisa Aldridge. I know that's like super bougie and a lot to spend for somebody who has a lot of green eyeshadow, but the formulas and textures in that palette just look incredible. So another color that has been intriguing me a lot recently, you can probably tell from my eyes as well, is blue. I used to actually say that blue was my favorite color for eyeshadow specifically. Um, and for a long time, the Blue Moon palette from ColourPop was my favorite palette. I would love to be able to pull off a like retro matte baby blue. And I've also always been attracted to like bright cerulean blues. Again, I would call that like the crayon box tones. But I've since realized that both the baby blue and the cerulean blue are not flattering on my skin tone. They definitely feel like a big statement. They just really clash. I think I can still wear it if I want to. Like, I feel free to wear it. I reserve the right to wear it whenever I want to, but it clashes and it doesn't look as flattering, I would say, as green, especially in those brighter forms. At the same time that I purchased the Earthy palette, I purchased the Beauty Bay Midnight palette. This is also depotted, and it's a blue and purple palette, and I have here my blue palette. So this doesn't show the purples in that palette, but You can see again these square pans with a B on them. Those are all from the Beauty Bay Midnight palette. The round ones are mainly ColourPop. I purchased this palette hoping that it would give me a wider variety of blues to explore. But I found when I started swatching it that it did lean too much into those very pure blue colors and very bright blues. I still love looking at these colors, admiring them, but I don't wear them as much as I used to. And I don't really wear them enough to justify having the variety that I do, honestly. So now I'm more on the hunt for gray based, foggy seascape blues and some grayish teals as well. There are lots of indie single shadows in this color family that I'm really dying to try. A lot of them in particular are from Luxie and Dandelions Co. I also do still have some blues in my collection that I absolutely adore. My number one favorite eyeshadow that I own is not my perfect green. It's actually an iridescent blue shade from the Blue Moon palette called Lumi. I'm wearing it in my inner corners today. I love that shade and I use it all the time. For some reason, I've never been attracted to bright, like jewel toned teals. And I still really have no time for those colors, even though I own a few. Like, I guess what I mean by that is more like this color, this color. I don't know, they just don't speak to me. I do like grayish teals, and I would like describe this one is a grayish teal, and I will be swatching a bunch of these for you, but yeah, so the more grayish teals are an area where I'm looking to expand some like nuance, some new textures, some multi-chromes or duochromes, just, I don't know, more nuance. I'm really interested in that recently. But as of today, I'm also really in love with this glitter topper from LA Girl. Again, it's called Holo-Glam. And I actually think this could be a really great way for me to incorporate that bright cerulean blue with other colors that are more sort of more aligned with my skin tone. So I could see myself just tapping this on top of like almost any color and getting something really satisfying. Here are some of those murkier, foggier blues that I do have in my collection. They're looking really sparkly here, but unfortunately it's mainly because of the sparkles left over on my hand, plus the camera is out of focus and I will figure it out in just a minute. But this top shade is from ColourPop from the It's a Mood palette, and it's the shade Feels Like. I actually really love this shade. It's got that sort of grayish teal base, but it has a warm gold sparkle on top. This shade Frost from the Earthy palette has a similar base, a little bit greener, but also that sort of murky gray shade, and it's just a little bit more silver than the other shade. This is Wit, also from the Earthy palette, and then this guy is Steel from the Midnight palette. And this is where I figure out that the camera was out of focus, so goodbye, all those beautiful sparkles. I would really love to find some of these kinds of shades in sparklier formulas with, you know, some shifts. I think this shade is so interesting and it has a lot of nuance that can be really amped up with more sort of interesting formulations than these ones. Okay, I have to admit, these are still showstoppers to me. I just love this cerulean tone. So these are more of the bright, clear, pure blues in my collection. This one here is called Daniel. It's also from Oden's Eye, and I just really, really love this shade. There's like something sheer in the base. It obviously has a very clear, bright blue sparkle coming through, and that shifts to more of a purple tone. And something about the sheerness of that base gives this a really like swimming pool look to me. I think this is a gorgeous shade. And this is actually just marketed as a regular shimmer, even though it has like a bit of a duochromatic shift. Which I think really just goes to show how far formulations have come in the last few years. Whereas this guy here, which is Tide Pool from the Blue Moon palette, this was once considered like, you know, a pretty impactful shimmer. And I used to love this shade. This was one of my favorites to wear. I still love that tone. It's just, you know, it looks more satin in comparison with the others. And even these guys, which are from Beauty Bay, they're right there in that same price point with the ColourPop, but there are a ton more sparkles in there. And and I think that's probably just because, you know, Blue Moon came out in 2019, and I think formulations have just kind of advanced. So these two are both from the Midnight palette from Beauty Bay, and this one I believe is the shade Potion, and this last one is Bubbles. They're obviously really similar shades. It's just that one of them has a bit of a darker base. Here are just some of my many pastel powder blues, baby blues. I don't really know how I ended up with so many of these, but just collecting various blue palettes over the years. This is Moonlight from the Blue Moon palette, followed by Mist from the Midnight palette. This guy down here is called Hot Copic, and that's from the Fade into Hue palette from ColourPop. And then this is Starry Eyed from Blue Moon. Okay, this is Billie Jean, also from Blue Moon. And I used to love this shade. When I first got this palette, this was the one I wanted all over my lid all the time. I just thought it was so magical. But for whatever reason, I haven't been able to replicate that feeling with this shadow, like, you know, after that first period. So I don't know if the formulation has changed, or maybe it was just more impressive to me back then, but I would like to give this shadow some more use in the near future because it is a really pretty tone. This guy is one of my favorite eyeshadows, possibly my actually favorite, like old reliable in my collection. This is Lumi, also from Blue Moon. It's a very smooth iridescent, and this was actually the first iridescent I ever encountered. I was fucking mesmerized, and I really still find this a gorgeous shadow. I love this all over the lid. I love it in the inner corner. I just love it all the time. Okay, this is definitely going to be the most impressive swatch I show you today. This is, I believe, a true glitter, and this is from LA Girl. It's the shade Holo-Glam. And it's obviously got that clear cerulean blue coming through, but it also has something purple and something a little bit green, and it all sits on a very sheer base. So the final intriguing color that I want to talk about today is red, and specifically red eyeshadow, but also red lipstick. I'll include that here too, and I have a couple swatches to go over for the red lipstick. And when I say red, I'm including like a really broad range of colors. For me, they have to be warm because on my skin, if they're cool or blue based, they immediately turn magenta, and a lot of lipsticks do that, unfortunately. So I'm talking about warm colors when I talk about reds. But my definition of red, it does include those pure fiery reds, as well as, you know, terracotta browns, brick colors, deep mulberry browns, as well as warm sickly pinks. So these are all colors that I'm interested in playing with in the near future. Low key, I am interested in that sickly conjunctivitis eye look. There's this amazing creator on Instagram, and I will insert her information here. She makes these like aestheticized ugly looks. and a lot of them do lean on warm red and pink tones. I think she's done sick girl makeup, crying girl makeup, maybe tired makeup. Um, Obviously, I don't enjoy being sick, crying, or being tired, but she makes these look so beautiful and so aesthetic, and I would really like to explore those looks on myself. In this category, I have some really, really lovely warm pinks. Definitely this shade from ColourPop, this is Labyrinth, that kind of fits the bill of what I'm talking about because it's a bit more brown. Like, this is a pink brown, and so I kind of feel like that fits into what I'm talking about right now. I also have some reds from the ColourPop Main Squeeze palette that sort of lean in that same direction. They're a little bit like warm pinks or browns. Yeah, as well as some of these like more juicy shimmers. So I am eyeing a light expansion in this category. I'm interested in some of the like warm mulberry shades from Lisa Aldridge's Single Eyeshadows collection, as well as sort of plummy rosewood mattes from Dandelions Co. There's also like a couple more punchy reds that I'm eyeing, notably Venus in Chains from Terra Moons. Although I think that like by and large, this Main Squeeze palette does hold up, and especially the mattes, they work really great. So I think I have a lot of my red eyeshadow needs covered. There's just, again, like some nuance that I'm interested in exploring. Okay, here are some of my matte reds. Definitely a lot of sickly tones in here. This is Labyrinth. It's a ColourPop single shadow. Everywhere from It's a Mood, also from ColourPop. This is Froze from the Main Squeeze palette. And I believe this next one is Seed Money from Main Squeeze. And then this last one is Raw from the Beauty Bay Earthy palette. It's definitely a bit of a stretch to call this a red, but the shade is called Red Rocks, and it's from the Flower Beauty Desert Lights palette. I've just been so into this tone recently, this like rich, deep mauve shade. It's had me like lusting after the Patrick Ta Major Dimensions 2, and like this shade is the closest I have to it and what I hope and wish that palette is. And then this is just a fiery copper called Tiger Lily from the Desert Lights palette. This shade is so interesting because only in the swatches here did I really actually notice how blue the base is. It comes off like a sheer iridescent, but it really does have something blue in the base. And what you're seeing in the camera is mainly a sort of cool toned cherry red, but it also has like a golden, fiery red, almost orange shift, and that's what predominantly comes through when it's on the eyes. And this is Red Giant from Terra Moons. Okay, here are two of the shimmers from the Main Squeeze palette. Again, it's a theme. The formulas don't really hold up, but I think the tones are really interesting. This is like a reddish gold. It sort of has a reddish base on it, and then a very strong golden shimmer that really predominates on the eye. This is the shade Juicy Fruit. And then this other one is Maraschino, and it's more red, but it has a golden shimmer on top as well. So I think these are an interesting pair because it sort of feels like a gold with a red and a red with a gold. Here are two of my favorite lipsticks. These are both from e.l.f. and they're both in the Seriously Satin formula. And fun fact, I actually paid like $1.20 for each of these. This is the shade Cherry. It's more blue based, but it's still neutral slash warm enough to pull like true red on me. And then this other one has a little bit more orange in it. It's called Pepper. And that on me looks like a very, very bright but still pretty neutral red. I generally need a lot of orange in a red lipstick in order to make it look neutral and true red on my warmer skin. But both of these pull as pretty true reds on me. So that's all I have. These are just 3 color families that have been really inspiring to me lately, areas where I'm interested in exploring more nuance, experimenting with different kinds of looks, and I'm sure that this will continue to expand because color is still very intrinsic to the way I view makeup and choose makeup in the morning. I'm usually getting up thinking, what color do I want to wear? But if I do end up expanding these areas of my eyeshadow collection after my no-buy, I will definitely be doing a sequel to this video where we're like swatching and admiring some of those new shades and comparing them to some of the ones I swatched for you today. So stay tuned for that, and I hope this was inspiring. Thank you so much for watching. Bye!